Hello, lovelies. I want to do a quick little coda on Mothership before I move on to other things. Some people rightly pointed out in the review that I missed talking about how it talks about running horror games. Now, there are two reasons for that. First, I think it was what I was about to talk about when I had the coughing fit and had to split the video in two. And secondly, I'm quite conflicted about the way they go about advising you to run horror games. Right, there is this fundamental schizophrenic issue that comes about when you're suggesting a horror game and yet you continually put content warnings and talk about everyone's comfort and so on. I think there's an issue that you can't really be doing both at the same time. Right? The one is in opposition to the other. In horror, you are aiming to create a visceral reaction of some kind: fear, disgust, anxiety, whatever. All the things that safety tools are intended to prevent. There's a passage here somewhere, or a page rather, that expounds on this in a way that I think is fundamentally flawed. Yeah, here under specifically safety instructions. The TLDR is that the creator views the issue of safety at the table as being one of hospitality, right? In that if you're a good host, you don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable or whatever. However, I think that fails to recognize that the hospitality thing is something that goes both ways, right? So if you go to a household and it is their way to take off your shoes while you're in the house, you comply with that, right? The people that own the house don't give you a free pass due to hospitality, right? And when it comes to role-playing games, you know, any one person is only one person, and there is the group to consider. And if we're all getting together to play a horror game and you keep interrupting or expecting special treatment or accommodation, then that's not right either. Or if you invite a vegan relative to, I don't know, the Christmas meal or something, right? Just because they're vegan doesn't mean everyone else has to stop eating meat, and it would be unreasonable and unfair of your vegan guests to insist that everyone else follows their dietary restrictions. So I think this analogy, just the idea of it being hospitality, doesn't work, because there are more people who one should be concerned with, right? And part of being a good guest is not fucking up whatever the host has put on show. So that's part of the problem here. The other reason I'm so conflicted about the advice that they give, which they characterize as TOMBS, which stands for, what was it? Transgression, omens, manifestation, banishment, and slumber. Right, so something happens which causes an issue. There are signs and portents that something horrible is going to happen. The horrible thing manifests, everyone gets together to deal with the horrible thing, and the horrible thing returns to slumber. Okay, that's formulaic. And yeah, there's the rub, I guess. Tangent. Running a horror game is very, very difficult. I think only comedy games are as difficult. And very few comedy games manage to actually work. The glaring exception, I think, is paranoia. And paranoia works because it is formulaic, right? You go into it knowing that these certain things are going to happen, and you have the anticipation towards those things, right? You know you're going to get summoned by the computer. You know you're going to get a briefing. You know everyone is going to constantly be trying to kill each other's character over the slightest slip-up that suggests you might be a commie mutant traitor. You know that you're going to get stuck with bureaucratic paperwork when you go to requisitions. You know that you're going to visit R&D and be given a bunch of laughable equipment that will nonetheless prove useful in the mission that you're going on, right? And how all of that unwinds is the funny part, but you have the anticipation of those various punchlines, right? And that works for comedy, but I do not think the formulaic approach really works for horror. I mean, Blumhouse's profit line on their accounts may prove me wrong, but I have greater aspirations for horror, and I feel that by presenting this formulaic approach and by presenting it in a kind of prescriptivist sort of way, this is how you do it. Consider these elements. Step 1, step 2. Here's a random table of elements. It's unambitious in how it seeks to invoke the horror. And that is where I think I part company with it. While at the same time, and this is where the trouble starts for me in reviewing it, at the same time I recognise that for a new player, a new starting games master, having the formula and so on can be useful. It's just a combination of the safety talk, which is antithetical to horror and the aims of horror, the prescriptivist nature of the way in which the information is presented, and the formulaic nature of it go against all of the drives that I would have for horror, though I am breaking my own rules and Ronin is presented in a quite prescriptivist sort of way. So you can call me a hypocrite, or you can call it me working against my instincts to try and better my creative flow, I suppose. I also didn't really talk about Unconfirmed Contact Reports, which is their book of monsters and so on. Again, I find myself conflicted. I find sci-fi horror tends to work better when there is an explanation, a scientific explanation, a real-world physical explanation for a lot of the spooky stuff that goes on. Something you can get at if you're lucky and stick to it enough. But a lot of the stuff in here is just pure woo. It's not like hallucinations brought on by jump drives or whatever else. So that's why I didn't really go into that, and why you've got this instead. Zang.
I don't often make explicitly political games, but The Little Grey Book is one of them. It's a parable about this social media panopticon we've all made, where everyone is always watching each other for anyone who steps out of line in any way. And The Little Grey Book is about the inescapability of upsetting someone. It's a one-trick pony, but it's a good one-trick pony. Available at DriveThruRPG and post-mort.com.